Well, we're back with the Honda Grom and replacing an aftermarket part that I put on previously that I really need to replace. So let this be a PSA for those of you replacing your chain adjusters. I've had aftermarket chain adjusters on the Grom for quite some time, and I really like them for a number of reasons. They are a lot easier to adjust than the OEM. They look a lot better than the OEM, and finally, they are a lot less susceptible to the problems of the OEM, where if you lose those adjusting bolts on the back, you can actually lose the entire backing plate, and then you have some really big problems in the rear assembly. However, when it comes to aftermarket chain adjusters, while some might look a little bit more aesthetically pleasing than others, they might not actually have the functionality and the robustness that you should expect when it comes to improving your chain adjusters from OEM. And that's what I've recently discovered when it comes to my chain adjusters. And so now I'm going to be replacing them with the functionality and the robustness in mind, so that way, hopefully, I don't have these issues going forward. But before we get into that, let's take the old aftermarket chain adjusters off so we can compare them to the new stuff and why I'm replacing them. But first, we actually have to put this up on jack stands because I'm using the spools right now. Spools are attached to the chain adjusters, so they're going to be coming off. And that way we can be able to take out the entire rear axle and actually loosen the old chain adjusters and slide them out, so we can compare them to the new stuff. So here we have the old aftermarket ones off the bike. Let's take a look at these, and at initial glance you can see that they're actually really nice. They're really well designed. It's sleek, it's very nice. CNC'd aluminum, the design is really pleasing, but there is a fatal flaw here, and that has to do with how it is adjusted. So to briefly show you, this is attached with a bolt right here, and it is threaded into this very large block which fits into the swing arm, and because, as you can see with this gigantic hole here, this holds the rear axle. So to adjust things, you would actually put an Allen wrench on the end of this bolt and tighten or loosen it, and when you tighten or loosen this block will cause it to move forward or backwards inside the swing arm to adjust your chain slack. It gets away with this because the bolt here on the end, where this is actually fitted to the end of the swing arm and locked in place, this is actually locked in as well. But that's where the issue comes in, because this is how it's locked in, and it is simply a tiny little retaining clip. And what I've found over the years is when I go to adjust this, no matter what, even if I do the proper protocol by actually loosening the rear axle, making sure there's no tension on this block whatsoever, when I go to tighten or loosen it, this retaining clip has bent and popped out on occasion, and I just completely lose all of my chain's tension. So that is a terrible design, to think that it all boils down to just one little retaining clip. And so for that reason, even though I really love the aesthetics of this, I'm going with another one that is tried and true, OTB. And so if we take a look at this, we can also see this is also very robust, but I really like that the adjuster bolt right here is much more significant. And so we can actually kind of simulate the adjustments right here with an Allen key. This is actually a much bigger bolt than you would see on the old stuff here, but it's threaded really nicely, and most importantly, at the very back here, we can see that it's not held in with a tiny retaining clip. There might be a retaining clip behind it. I'm actually not 100% sure how this is secured, but it's internal, meaning it won't actually pop out, and I won't have the potential of losing it like I almost did many times with this design. So now we can go straight into the install, and it's pretty straightforward with this. The whole unit is just going to slide into the swing arm like so. But something I want to point out with these specific OTB chain adjusters. So these are going to be attached to the swing arm, secured into place by this metal piece right here. It is kind of sandwiched together on the end, and there is a little prong that sticks out to go over the existing swing arm. But if we look at it a little closer, we can see that this prong actually has a little notch about 1/3 of the way up, and that's as far in as it goes. The swing arm doesn't need to go all the way down to the bottom here. If you jam this thing all the way in there, then it could get stuck, or worse, it could get out of alignment because it would actually be kinked just ever so slightly inside there, which will wear out pieces, including your axle. You don't want that. Just make sure that when you're installing this, you just go up to the notch right here and then tighten down. You don't have to jam it all the way in there. So it's actually locked onto that notch right now. It still has a little bit of play, but that's fine because we just need to tighten this up and then we'll be good to go. Now I'll repeat the process and do the exact same thing on the other side. So now we got the chain adjusters installed and tightened on each side, including the spools. Now we can continue by throwing that rear axle in there and actually using the chain adjusters for what they are, to adjust the chain. PSA, actually, I just noticed this myself. When you're tightening these bolts, this and the spool, don't tighten them too much, because if you tighten them too much, the clamping force right here actually causes this to bind up. So I actually looked on their website and saw a video that they had done with hard racing, and they said the torque spec for these should be only 8 foot-pounds, not a lot. So now we can actually get into adjusting the chain with the new chain adjusters, and as you can see here, it is obviously very loose. I have these as far forward as possible, and now I have it on the center stand as well because I have the spools. That way this thing doesn't slide around, and we have this completely loose. It's just sitting on the rear axle. The rear axle is not pinching on the swing arm whatsoever. So what we're gonna do now is take the Allen key and actually tighten these on both sides. There are plenty of tick marks right here, so we can make sure that the same tick mark is at the same position on both sides, so that way we know it's actually square and true. So we'll just tighten up each side a little bit at a time and periodically check the chain slack in the front so we can see exactly where we're at and how much we should have. I think I call that good enough. Now that everything is adjusted to our liking, we can go ahead and tighten up and torque the rear axle. The rear torque spec is 44 foot-pounds. So now that we have everything complete, everything is tightened, torqued, and properly tensioned, the last step is just putting in, at least in my case, putting in these little plastic sliders that we have here from TST, and we're done. So just something to keep in mind if you are planning on doing chain adjusters for yourself. Make sure that you look not just at the design of it, but also just how robust, how tough these things are. I'm pretty sure that these new ones from OTB are gonna stand up a lot more than the old ones.